Perfect. So I'm so happy to welcome Rotem Shamir to the Filmi Baniya podcast here in New Delhi in India. And Rotem,
Thank you for having me.
Just like to give an introduction, Filmi Baniya is an online community of film lovers, TV content lovers, and it's rapidly growing. This is our first video interview. And after this interview is recorded, it's going to go to audiences in the United States, in India, and even portions of the Middle East. And
I'm honored to be the first interview.
Yes,
thank you
so much. And I would just like to say that I'm a very big fan of the TV show Fauda. And today's podcast is talking about you and this amazing show, which is finding resonance with a lot of Indian audiences over a period of time. And to all the listeners and viewers, Rotem is an accomplished filmmaker and director from Israel. Other than Fauda, he has written a TV show called Hostages, which is already doing very high ratings on the Disney Plus Hotstar platform, has been adapted in the Hindi language and stars Ronit Roy and a number of leading actors, and it's in Hindi and has been produced by Applause Entertainment. And it's a beautiful show and just shows the kind of knowledge what Rotem has acquired over the years over this subject and genre of intelligence, espionage, action, and security. So today's show...
My favorite.
Oh, fantastic. And how's the weather back in Israel? Is it okay? How are you guys?
We're slowly starting to feel the summer coming, and in Israel, the summer is the kind of time in the year where you get to forget how hot it can be. You know, you have about 8 months to forget, and then you are reminded full power. So we are about there almost.
Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is quickly, let's go to the questions about the show from our viewers. And I think we can just, first of all, the first question from our viewers is, how is Fauda different from standard Hollywood shows on counterterrorism like 24, Designated Survivor, etc.?
Right. First difference would be, of course, the budget. Fauda is a show that is being made in about 1/15 the budget of an American show. It influences, of course, every decision-making on the way. We like to think that the budget limitations here in Israel are a curse, but also a blessing, in the sense that it kind of pushes everybody in the profession to think outside the box and to invent almost every trick possible to make the shows look like they look or feel like they feel. I think so. That would be the first big difference. The other that's from the production point of view. From the content point of view, I think I can say that Fauda has, let's say, a non-apologetic attitude behind its making. So, in a sense, if we were an American show, of course, if it's a broadcast American, network American show, we would answer to all these rules, I guess, of what is allowed or not allowed to be said or to be done. And Fauda is not bended to those rules, and that, I think, allows us to create this very forward-moving world with no questions asked, and do things in the show that I think eventually is what gives the show the edge that everybody likes, because, again, of the fact that we're a very small production and Israeli located, and not, we're not bended to anybody. To say the truth, even the broadcaster here in Israel, a network called Yes, that is producing the show.
Yes, of course.
They allow us, basically autonomy in the world of Fauda. They hardly intervene, and we have freedom to work, and I think that creates the big difference.
Wow. So, in my own personal opinion, the first thing which comes to your mind when you think of shows on counterterrorism is this big room with a lot of computer screens, number of these guys wearing Bluetooth headsets, talking and ruling the world. Everything's on the palm of a hand, and everything is so automated that the human factor becomes so less, and it's more about surveillance and acting on information around surveillance to initiate anything. But in Fauda, you see that it's a no-frills, low cost, if I might say, operation,
Yes.
and it
Uh-huh.
looked really effective. And that's what really,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's what I feel.
I
Okay,
think I think it's a good observation, and of course that also is created by the fact that we deal with a small team of anti-terrorism that is being that basically penetrates enemy territory. In that sense, it's a feet on the ground show. It's not about the people behind the scenes. We have that element in the show, but most of what we do is we are on the ground with the force that is going in and creates a more dynamic and live action.
superb, superb. Our next question is, how did you get involved with the project of Fauda?
So Fauda was, a surprise hit in Israel here in the first season. The first season was directed by Asaf Bernstein, a very talented Israeli director, who after the first season, went and made a movie in the States and became not available for the second season. And they were looking for somebody to step in those very big shoes.
Okay.
At that time, I was doing a feature movie that was called Bus 300, I think it's called in English. And it's also an anti-terrorism movie. And it gave me a good, ticket into the work on Fauda. And the second thing that really, bought me a seat at the table is that I met the guys, Lior and Avi. Lior, the creator and star, and Avi, his co-creator.
Of course.
And we quickly learned that all three of us were raised in Jerusalem, and that all three of us went to combat military service, and that bonding was important, and it kicked off a very healthy relationship between us, and I love it.
Superb, superb. Our next question is, how do you manage the politics of the show so that it does not overpower the narrative of its characters and its story? So this question, especially from we in India, we see the India-Pakistan conflict as very similar to the Israel and Palestinian conflict. And what we have seen is that because the jingoism, the rhetoric is so loud, because, it's about patriotism, yada, yada, yada. And, you are like, how it is. So how did you manage that your narrative is more stronger than the politics?
I think it's just almost a simple answer to this question. Fauda, in my eyes, that's my approach, is not a political show.
Oh.
It's not, it doesn't deal with politics. The conflict is the setting of the plot, but we don't judge the conflict. We don't try and make an opinion about the conflict. We basically say, we pick out these characters and we just tell their story as it is. So, consider it, as I like to call it, Narcos in the Middle East. It's a high octane thriller driven by people with, blood in their eyes. And it's all set upon this conflict that if we weren't living in Israel right now and we weren't experiencing this conflict in our own sense, it wouldn't feel to us political at all. This is like watching, for example, back in the 80s, a movie about, the IRA, or let's say Brad Pitt is an IRA bomber and he comes to, the United States. And these movies were made back then and everybody said, okay, it's not about the Irish conflict, but it takes place in that setting. So that's a very big difference in the approach. And just to let you know, those decisions influence a lot of little moments that we have, let's say in the editing room, when we feel the show becomes too political. We feel like we are now not speaking from the mouths of the characters, but speaking from the mouths of the creators and having an opinion about politics. We cut it out. We try and maintain as story-oriented as we can, and I think that gives the show this kind of like balance between the views of the characters.
Okay, so our next question is on our lead protagonist of the show, Doron, played by the great Leo Raz. And please throw some light on Doron's emotional journey, because one of the most amazing things about this show is that your protagonist is, I wouldn't say he's confused, but he has a very complex life. And he has been through his marriage with Gali, then he has Shireen in the 2 seasons. And then in the 3rd season, he has the other lady officer, with whom he's involved briefly. Plus, there are some really brutal moments in the show, especially in the second season when Shireen and he are coming back to his house and his father is murdered by Al-Muqdasi. So just throw some light on Doron's emotional journey through the seasons, his relationship with Shireen, his broken marriage. What is it that keeps him going, beyond all of this? What is the energy fuel for him?
So first of all, I think I would say that he's confused. It's a part of his, is that, he has this identity issue because Doron is a person that dresses up as somebody else in order to do his job. And of course, because his job is 90% of his life, then the fact that he has to change his identity becomes a big issue in his life. He's more comfortable in a way and more free when he's on the Palestinian side. Under these, fake identities that he makes up, he becomes a different person and he feels connected to that person. And the relationship with Shireen comes from that point of view. When he eventually tells her the truth about who he is, he's still very much like is said by his father in the second season, an Arab Jew or a Jew Arab. Those two characters live in him. So that's definitely one aspect of his character. The other aspect is the fact that Doron is a no questions asked kind of warrior, in the sense that he is very emotional and less tactical in the way that he thinks about solving situations. I think that's a part of his, appeal, is that he will go through the wall with his head right now if he feels like this is what needs to be done. And the reason is because in Fauda, and that is on the poster of the Israeli version of Fauda, in Fauda, everything is personal. Everything that happens in the show happens to him specifically. They come after his father. They go to his house. They visit his children. And in that sense, it becomes very personal. And once things are personal for a hero like Doron, it becomes emotional. And he moves without thinking. And he, sometimes, of course, there are bad consequences to the way that he does those things. So that combination of a confused identity with this emotional roller coaster makes him a very human action hero. He's hurt and he's vulnerable, and nevertheless he is merciless. So yeah, I think that's the secret of his appeal.
Because once you look at Doron, he's not your typical Arnold Schwarzenegger, Stallone type action hero. Like he's
right.
Bald, he's middle-aged, he rarely shaves, I mean, he has a certain enigma about him, and I totally get what you're trying to say. Our next
question. Somebody said to me that in a way that should be the next James Bond, that in a way we're at this point where we need this kind of like human hero that we can all say not only, I identify with him, but actually I can be with him, I actually look like him. He's not this extremely handsome, tall, blonde guy, and I think that's magic.
Well, I think Leo Raz has also portrayed the character so brilliantly that although he's speaking in a different language and you hear him in dubbed language in countries like India, but you still resonate with him personally. And I think that's the beauty of your direction, the powerful writing, is that beyond languages and in a dubbed language, you can feel the punch as a viewer. I think that's really important. Okay, so our next question is that a lot of Indian fans tend to love the realism of Fauda. It looks very real. It looks like the characters are all, they're all living that hell, that horror. Like just another question came from one of our readers, is that there's a scene in which Noor Ali's character is being tried to be raped by this gang of Palestinian extremists in that building. And one gets that big punch like you get in The Godfather, when James Caan visits his sister and he sees all those bruises on her face in The Godfather, The Godfather. Right. And that's what we felt with Fauda, that it hits you. So how did you make the show look so real and believable?
Well, The secret here is that we try to give this documentary look to everything, of course, in the handheld camera work that we do here. The camera in Fauda is, I would say, nothing less than crazy when it comes to covering the action. You have very tough, camera guys. The DP of the 2 seasons that I did with Fauda, his name is Mosh Mishali, and he's just an amazing guy who just dive into the action, and never get out of there before everything is over. What you see on the screen, what you call a sweaty character, is a part of what I told you earlier about Israeli summer. When we go and shoot Fauda, we just do it. It's really hot outside. We just go into very dirty buildings, and we just do it. For example, there was a big sequence in the 3rd season where the Israeli guy Avichai accidentally shoots somebody from our side, and that was basically a whole day of SWATs and Fauda soldiers, 2 camera crews, and just occupying this building, almost in live action. And I think that gives us this Ridley Scott Black Hawk Down kind of
yes.
A greedy, suburban, not suburban, sorry, the other suburban, greedy between the buildings kind of fighting scenes, and everything kind of explodes in your face, and that's the advantage of the action.
Superb. And now just talking about, if you look at it, one can feel that it's been shot like Paul Greengrass's movies, that he uses the handheld really to perfection, especially in the first Bond series.
Right.
I think first or second, I forgot which Greengrass directed. And,
I think the first and the third was his.
First and the third, yeah, of course. So I think those chase sequences are done quite beautifully. And that's why, again, as you said, the handheld camera played its magic.
It's more than just the camera. I'll give you another point. I think that Greengrass, let's say, and Fauda has in common. It's what I call the point of view of the action. When you go into an action sequence, if you have a lot of money and you just basically shoot the sequence, then you can go ahead and give all point of views, and then in the editing room you decide, I'll cut to this angle and everything. Here you are confined to the point of view of the person within that action sequence. You are literally in his point of view. When he picks up the behind the wall, what he sees is what you can see, and you kind of never cut away from it. That makes it very intense. You're in the car, you're in the plane, you're on the ground, and I think that makes it very intense. I think it's an advantage for an action director to choose a point of view of what character is going through the action, and not just say, there's a big action sequence going on here. Let's see it from the helicopter. Let's see it from the tower. That kind of gives it a big, definitely a big screen situation, but less intense and less greedy.
Fantastic. So moving to our next question, what are your favorite TV shows, your influences, director, writers, editors, cinematographers, and who has inspired you as a storyteller, filmmaker? This is like a break question. We'll get back to the show, but this is a little break question about you. So please tell us.
So it is a great question in the sense that I would surprise you and say that a lot of my influences doesn't have to do with this greedy, realistic look that we just talked about. I'm a big fan of David Fincher, and his work both in film and television. I grew up with my film taste in the 90s, admiring the 70s filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, and the Paranoid thrillers, Ellen J. Pakula, and those are a lot of things that, as a growing up filmmaker, I definitely was letting them influence my work and my thinking. When I came to Fauda, I needed to kind of find my own voice within the language that was already invented by the first season, and that's when I dove into those worlds of Black Hawk Down or Paul Greengrass, and how do you create this, very intense, high octane sequences. So I took a kind of like step aside from my personal taste. My next show, for example, is a cop show that I'm going to shoot here in Israel. It's going to be a lot more classic, and the camera is not going to be running around like crazy. And so I hope I can, make that adjustment to any show that needs it.
Superb. And now coming back to the show, something which a lot of us notice is how the unique treatment of the women characters of Fauda. So, like the journey of Shireen, Nurit, and Gully. Uh, Throw some light on them because we see them as not just bystanders in the entire plot. They're very active. They are, in fact, grabbing the narrative at certain points. And you see them as very, very powerful individuals. How did you write these? What was the unique strategy behind them?
Well, it's really amazing that you feel the way that you feel about the women characters in Fauda, because in a way, Fauda, in Israel at least, is portrayed as a very manly, show. But I think the reason that you feel what you feel is that almost every woman character in Fauda naturally has to take the opposite side of violence is the only solution. The women always kind of try to say, hold on one second. That happens, by the way, also, especially in the Palestinian side. You could see the Palestinian side that the women characters are there to kind of like stock sense into this manly driven, mad driven boys. And I think that gives them this unique sense in the show. In the Israeli side, I think what we try to talk about a lot in Fauda is the collateral damage of anti-terrorism activity. You bring back home, all these wounds that you basically have, both mentally and physically. And when you bring it back home, that will influence your environment deeply. That will, of course, resonate through your family and your wife, and it will become a part of the way that you act and feel on the battlefield. And we tried in the third season to even make a deeper journey into that aspect, that the warriors are always carrying home, and home is always carrying the field, and they influence each other.
Well, because when you look at even Nurit's character, she's part of this ensemble of these men, kicking ass with guns and jumping on, doing other things. And you see, so I would say that if you look at Shireen's character, she's a doctor, right? And at the same time, she's with Palestinian terrorists, Walid, and she is at the same time a lover for Doron, and you see them wearing these different, and what ultimately happens to Shireen, because she feels that her boyfriend doesn't trust her after all these years, and nobody trusts her, so she recognizes her emotional arc and her flaws, and I would actually disagree that part of it you can say it's a man's show because it's man-to-man combat. Both the antagonists and the protagonists are men, but women play a very, very, very crucial role. In fact, my father, who was watching Fauda, and he's like fairly old, and he loves watching the shows. And he was talking about in the first episode that Palestinian terrorist who's killed, his fiancée comes out becoming a human bomb in that bar, in the first season. So I think they're very much at the driving seat at times. And
it definitely becomes that. And I will tell you about Nurit, that the idea of being a single woman in an all-men team, and the price that it takes from her, and like you mentioned in season 2, the big lynch scene is basically saying a woman in a man's world, or a woman in a man's shoes, is still a woman. She still needs to fight that battle. She still needs to be something else and make sacrifices of different kind than what a man would probably make. And in her journey in the second season and also in the third, it's about her trying to come to sense with the fact that she could never give up combat. Such a part of her that she is willing to kind of like, let go of a woman aspect and let go of almost a little bit of a human aspect, to level the field with the boys, maybe kill the emotion or become more robotic. And that's a big price to pay, So those are themes that we always were interested in, exploring with Ronit, the actress, and of course the other characters. And I'm very happy that you feel that it's not only a men's show. I'm very happy.
Thank you so much. And in fact, I would also like to ask now, I was researching on the internet various interviews of yours, Lior's and Avi's, and a lot of people have been talking about the real life experiences of Lior as an IDF personnel, and Avi also working as a journalist around that this entire conflict. And as we were talking about the realism, and I think people are talking about how did Lior and Avi and yourself bring these real life experiences, and how did they come in handy while doing this show?
So Lior and Avi were both basically soldiers in a unit that is similar to the one described in Fauda, in the sense that they were, dressing up and going into these operations. So that's where they know each other from. They met after a few years that they didn't see each other, and they started talking, and let's do a show about that kind of a unit. When they set out to write it, I think they made a decision that they will bring in their personal experiences into the show and not hide behind their personal experiences. Lior almost had a psychological treatment dealing with the very hard stories that he had to tell for the first time as a grown man. And that also resonates in the character of Doron. Like we said earlier, he's a very emotional guy, and Lior just put his emotions on the line and just said, I'm going to deal with it in front of the camera for the whole world to see. And that's very honest. And I think people they appreciate honesty. When I come in as a director, and I also have my own combat experience, it helps me in the technical aspect. It helps me with directing, the action sequences, sometimes helping people understand how to hold your weapon, how to advance into a building. Of course, in the sense of less budget, then you have less of these experts that you can count on a daily routine, and then I can come in and give him from my experience. So I think that allows for the action to look as it does.
Superb. Now, just coming to another question, a little bit out of the show. What is Israel's mindset as a country, as we see through your shows as well, on counterterrorism? I mean, how does it... So here's my personal view. I see them as on a relentless pursuit of eliminating what they think is wrong. And in your show, one thing which comes out quite viscerally, if I might add, is that you don't have a cloak and dagger approach when it comes to what is terrorism. So when you look at the families of Bashar in the 3rd season, if you look at Al-Maqdisi, Al-Maqdisi, who's from ISIS, and Abu, who's in the 1st season, we see their whole families, we see their entire family and the institutionalization of terrorism within that entire community. So I was very curious about this question. How does Israel look upon this challenge in a different way?
Well, I think there's a difference between how the show portrays it and how Israel portrays it. I don't think there's similarities in the two. I think the show portrays it very simply as a circle of violence that, would never end, basically. And we all know that violence, leads violence. So that's very strong in the 3rd season. That you can see Bashar starting as an innocent boxer that has nothing to do with terrorism, just, the fact that his proximity to somebody who does have terrorism, he's getting sucked into the story, getting used by the Israeli authorities, and becomes, his father. By the end of the season, he goes back into prison like his father just went out of. We try to see that as something that we all believe in. Hopefully, we can find a solution that will cut that, circle of violence. When you come to understand where terrorism in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict comes from, you have to take under consideration the fact that it's 50 years of conflict. So it's a 3rd or 4th generation of people that are being affected by the violence of this conflict from both sides. So that's the approach of the show. I think Israel is a lot less, understanding in the sense of seeing the Palestinians, at least the Israeli public is that way, of seeing the Palestinians as also victims of the conflict. So when you look at terrorists, you immediately think bad guy. And when you look at the anti-terrorist, you think good guy. Of course, we all know this is not black and white. There are a lot of gray areas here defining who's good and who's bad. Point of view, history, all those things. So we try to say in Fauda, of course, these guys, when they turn into terrorism. They eventually are coming from a very violent and evil place, but there are origins to those evil acts. And I have to say, forget again the fact that it's a political statement, makes them a more interesting character, like you would see in Joker. Joker, at the end of Joker is what you know from Jack Nicholson Joker. He's just crazy mad person with some makeup. That's not depth in character. Depth in character is where did that evil come from? And that makes them interesting. That makes them three-dimensional. And I think that makes them more appealing for characters in the show.
Thank you for that. And I think your point is true. And the same one can see that even in the Indian-Pakistan conflicts, a lot of storytellers have talked about the origins of terrorism. But at the same time, it's important for Indians also to take sides with their armies. And we don't mind if the other side too takes side of their own army. And I really love the fact that you have put a balance to your entire argument here. And we really respect
I think our job sometimes as cultural leaders, if you want to say, or people that have something to say in culture, our job sometimes is not to state facts, but more to raise questions. We are there to kind of, make people think a little different than what they usually think, because you can always hear, especially nowadays with what we call the echo chamber, where everybody is connected in the network, or what do you call that, social networking. Everybody's hearing the same opinion and keep hearing that the fact that they think that way is the right way. It's important to sometimes bring in another point of view and kind of raise the questions. What you do with the questions, how you answer them, that's on you. But I'm here to make you think a little different.
Fantastic. So last two questions before we round this up. Last three questions, actually. How does it feel that you and your show has a big fan following in India? How's the feeling?
That's unfucking-livable. For us, it's just...
I will send you the Facebook thread of my post. And I told you my friend Surabhi, who's in India, and she has this big crush on this gentleman in the third show who plays, the bodybuilder. I forgot his name. The bearded gentleman. Yes, absolutely. And another friend, Arjun Nijaban, who's another big fan of the show, he also said, when do we get, these kind of shows in India with so much honesty? And although we are not part of the conflict, but as you, and that's my next question, what are the universal themes in this show which have resonated with viewers across the world?
So I think you mentioned earlier the word honesty. I always think that when it comes to art in general, honesty is one commodity, one currency that you cannot fake. If people feel that you come from an honest place, then they think that their money is not being taken from them in a way. And a lot of art forms and a lot of TV shows, films, never mind, they have this fakeness behind them. You don't really see honesty behind the making of the show. And I think Fauda is being made from, at least the way that we feel, a very honest place, and people that resonates. As far as, themes that are universal, like you said, immediately you come to think about your own conflicts. You come to think about, how do you act, and what kind of a price that you people or your family pay for those actions. And that's universal. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, unfortunately, is one out of many conflicts in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons India is now thinking about remaking Fauda, is because it's not necessarily an Israeli show.
So is that a news I can tell my viewers, that Fauda is now being made in India with the Indian perspective?
I can't say for 100%, but from what I know, I think it's definitely getting there.
Okay. I think Filmi Baniya will be the first platform to release this information that is now being made for the Indian audience. And a last question, Rotem. We've already taken a lot of your time. Do you have any messages for the fans of Fauda in India from your side?
Well, like I said earlier, this for us, the journey of Fauda in the world is just amazing. We are a very small family kind of show that we make in Israel in very low budget. We never thought ever in our wildest dreams that this will become such a big international hit. And I get messages from people in India all the time. I'm very happy to hear that you guys like the show. I hope you stay our fans for the next seasons to come. And this is very, very flattering, and we love you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think I would like to thank Netflix as well to bring this show into India. They have played a big part. They've been,
yes.
So what we're going to do is once this interview is fully, recorded and ready to upload, we'll be tagging Netflix India, Fauda's official Twitter handle, your Twitter handle.
Netflix India.
Netflix India. And many thanks, Rotem, for your time. And
thank you.
Hope you have a great day ahead. And many thanks from the Filmi Baniya team here in New Delhi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.